Hello, and welcome back to Inside Marketing. Welcome to another episode. Welcome if you are joining us for the first time. Welcome if you are tuning in again. And today we have a really exciting episode here with Emily Tippins, who is the Chief Marketing Officer and General Marketing Guru, currently Chief Marketing Officer at Avantra. So we're really privileged to have you here, Emily. So thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, thanks, Sophie. It's a privilege to be here. Looking forward to it. Should be an interesting chat.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you for taking the time. As I always say to our guests, I'm well aware marketing is a very busy industry, profession, role.
Yeah.
So yeah, to get an hour of your time is fantastic. And yeah, I think we're going to have some really interesting discussion. I've been since we first connected, been kind of tuning in with some of your posts on LinkedIn and some of the insights that you've been sharing, really interesting, and kind of exactly the topics that we love to discuss on this
Good.
podcast. So yeah, really delighted that we'll be able to bring that for the listeners
Mm.
today. But as always, Emily, a fantastic place for us to start, if you wouldn't mind indulging us. It's always really interesting to see where people like yourselves started in marketing, because that's who we're speaking to. We're speaking to people who are in senior kind of marketing positions, but kind of winding back the clock and saying, where did it all sort of begin? Were
Mm.
you always interested in marketing? What experiences have you had in your career that have kind of shaped the way you approach marketing now? And then maybe a bit about your role at the moment. If you wouldn't mind kind of taking us on that journey, that'd be great.
Yeah. Winding back the clock is a scary thing to do when you get to my age, but yeah.
It is.
I
None
mean,
of us like to
yeah.
do that. I'm sorry to put you through
But
it.
yeah, I mean, if I were to wind back the clock, I mean, I've actually been in marketing since I left university, which is getting on for like 25
hmm
years ago now.
hmm
My degree I did in English language and English literature. So I've always had that passion
Yeah.
for words, for how we communicate through words. My degree actually touched on a bit of media studies as well. So actually how film has a persuasive element to it, use of propaganda,
hmm
all those kind of things are really fascinating to me. And I pretty much stepped out of university straight into the publishing world. I was in Oxford, and there's just loads of publishing houses in Oxford. And I felt like quite
Yeah.
chuffed that I'd managed to get a job. Oh, I'm in publishing. When actually I was actually in
Yeah.
in the marketing department doing online help support at
hmm
the beginning. And I was very fortunate after a couple of months that a position in the marketing department came up for somebody to look after their list of journals that were to do with life sciences
Okay.
and biology and ecology. So I have
Mm.
no like background in those life sciences whatsoever. But the idea
Yeah.
of actually working alongside people in marketing and getting to understand actually what the editors of those journals needed in order to promote
Mm.
their product to universities, to various different institutions that
Mm.
would take out a subscription was actually really a really great sort of grounding and foundation for me. I was also fortunate that they
Yeah.
paid for me to go through the CIM. So I think that, any
Oh, amazing.
marketer really worth their weight has probably gone through something like that. Not necessarily the CIM charged
Mm.
into marketing, but something like that, because I think without the theory behind you, you don't necessarily understand how you can break the rules or how those rules actually help you frame the strategy work that you might be doing later on in your career. So, all those things that we've all
Yeah.
learned about the Boston Matrix, Ansos Matrix, all these kind of things, actually the four
Yeah.
P's or whether they're 8, 10, 12 P's now, but they're actually really good fundamentals in marketing that I think are really
Mm.
valuable for us, especially when we think about when we get later in our careers, we need to be thinking more critically. So how does our critical thinking play into some of the strategies we put together for our business and our teams that have been based on some of those
Yeah.
fundamentals? So yeah, I was
Mm.
really fortunate actually to walk into a really great environment straight from uni. And I stayed there for about 5 years. I was doing conferences all over the world as well. It was very much an
Wow.
environment where you were given ownership of your own. They called it a list. But your own accounts effectively. So I had maybe 25
Sure.
journals that I was responsible for marketing, and you had to do a marketing plan for every single one of them. You had to obviously have
Yeah.
review calls with what would have been your clients, effectively the journals or the professional
hmm
institutes that wrote those journals. So it was really great to
Mm.
cut my teeth there. But it was a very, very full on role. Like I said, traveling across the globe at the age of like 22, when I'd never really done anything like
Yeah.
that, was quite, on your own a lot of the time, was really quite
Yeah.
incredible to do, but it was also very stressful. And you
Yes.
when you came back to the office, nobody had been doing your work for you while you were away. So you'd been traveling across time zones and
Yeah.
coming back to your desk and expecting to do all these other things. So whilst it was absolutely
Yeah.
fantastic, I found that after 5 years of doing that, I pretty much burnt out. I was probably a little bit
Yeah.
too keen to please and take on everything, and I was
Yeah.
very much a yes person, wanting to be everybody's darling. And I've learnt now that that's not actually
Yes.
a great place to put yourself in, because you do just you burn out. So a note to other
Burnout.
people out
Yeah.
yeah, a note to other people out there is that no job is more important than your health. So I was in a
Mm.
position where I could just reflect and say, actually, this is becoming a little bit too much for me. I need to take back some time for myself. So that's when I then
Yeah.
switched slightly, and I went into retail for a little bit, and I really loved
Yeah.
the idea of actually speaking with customers and buyers, like on the ground, and doing a bit of merchandising and all that sort of stuff. I really, really enjoyed that, but the
Mm.
pay was appalling. And I have so much respect for anybody who's in those kind of service industries, because they don't get paid hardly anything, and they put in the hours, they work the weekend.
No.
It's really tough. So after doing that for a while, I then thought, actually, I need to get back in more of a kind of corporate environment. And so that's
Mm-hmm.
when I looked at other sort of business to business roles, where I could actually use my marketing skills
Mm-hmm.
to go into a slightly different industry. And I actually ended up going, it was a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of, as many things are, it's right place, right time for people, right? I think gone are the
Of
days
course.
essentially when
Yeah.
you're like sat there applying for jobs online. More often than not, it's who you know, being in the right place, and
Of course.
being available at the right time. And I managed to get
Yeah.
into a financial services business as their digital marketer.
Mm-hmm.
Again, no background in financial
Okay.
services whatsoever. But I think I was quite
Mm.
fortunate that I had the kind of brain that could wrap my head around things quite quickly with regard to like new concepts,
Yes.
business models, that sort of thing. And so back in the day, because this is still, we're talking quite a long time ago, digital marketing wasn't really a thing in its own right at that time. It was just emerging.
Yeah. Of
Um,
course.
and it was a lot to do. There wasn't really any sort of digital marketing stuff at that point in terms of the paid media that we see today. It was more about the kind of user
Yeah.
experience and the interface of how communications digitally would actually work. So for
Yes.
me, I got to do, a sort of digital media plan. I got to work on our website
Mm.
and understand how do people come to the website? How do we present information to them when we don't actually know what their pathway is? And some of those things
Sure.
that I learned around UX are still really valuable to me today, even though I don't specialize in that area. And the idea actually of
Mm. Yeah.
not forcing people down a particular path. When they're a web user, they quite often come to your website with already preconceived ideas of what they need, what they want, and you can't or you
Mm.
shouldn't really force them down a particular route, because they will make their own path. So with your website, you just need to kind of signpost those things, give them different options so they can take that route themselves and feel like they're in control before they talk to a salesperson. Because quite often, as we all know now, it takes many, many interactions before somebody's actually ready to speak to a salesperson. So that was really
Yes.
interesting. I
Yeah.
stayed
Much more
in.
about
Go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just going to say much more about sort of self-discovery, isn't it? And that
Yeah,
feeling of almost fulfillment that you get as a customer, and what that does to the psychology of the buying process. If it's too,
absolutely.
yeah, too kind of pigeonholy from the beginning, that they don't like it. It doesn't
No,
feel like something that they're in control of, and then we don't feel comfortable. So it's interesting,
exactly.
isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that
Mm.
that I still see
Mm. Was it
websites
good?
today where you land on a homepage and it says, "Are you this type of person, or are you this? Like, are you a small business?" And it's
Yeah.
just it makes me cringe, because I'm just like, actually,
Yes.
you should be putting up information there, so let that person decide what's the right path, and not like shoehorn them into saying, "Oh, I'm this." We all want to categorize people, don't we? And in marketing, we do that a lot.
Yeah.
We want to
Absolutely.
categorize people into the right persona, the right audience, the right buying stage.
Mm.
Whereas actually, I think there's more work to be done with actually understanding how we can present information to people so that they can make their own decisions and still land at the right information. Yeah.
Absolutely. And what you say there, I mean, it's a very selfish ask, really, from businesses who are doing that. And everything's relative. I mean, if I come on and I run a business of 2 people, I'm going to perceive myself as a small business in those categories. But someone else who runs a business of 100 people might also consider themselves a small business. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a little bit flawed, isn't it? And we're putting it all in. We're asking too much of the customers there.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're getting too
Absolutely.
into that, but I can tell we're
Absolutely.
both passionate
Yes.
about it.
Yeah.
Good to have had that foundation, though. Really
Absolutely.
interesting to have been a digital marketer in that early stage of digital marketing, and how
Yeah.
that's given you a foundation, and how you've
Yeah.
almost been able to kind of grow with it.
Yeah.
And that's, yeah, really, really interesting. So,
Mm.
yeah, wow, what a role. Yeah.
I mean, I thought that I was going to actually stay in that field. I felt like, oh, I found my niche. I found
Mm,
like where I'm valued and where I can actually make a difference. So I did actually stay within that
mm,
sort of field for quite a few years, and I ended up going to agency side, working on digital marketing strategies,
yeah,
working alongside different businesses to help them with their digital communications. Um, and that was such a great experience to actually see then how, okay, now we're starting to do SEO. What does that mean? Now we're starting to do paid media. What does that mean?
yes,
And especially when you work
yeah,
agency side, I think it's great for every marketer to have done both sides, because I think you get a very different
yes,
perspective, don't you? And now, as somebody who's back in client
definitely, yeah,
side, now I'm back in client side, I understand when I'm working with an agency the pressures that they're under, and how to work with them as
mm,
a partner so that you get the best out of each other, because it is a partnership, isn't it? So yeah, that
yeah,
was really
absolutely,
great.
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's very interesting actually to observe people who have always worked at client side or in-house versus agency. And I do agree with you that I think having both perspectives is so essential. Because
mm,
otherwise it's all a bit mysterious, isn't it? What is
yes,
an agency? How do we work with them? How many hours do we get? What can we do
yes,
this? Can we ask for that? When's best to contact them? Whereas, yeah, when you've had that taste of working that side yourself, you know how the operations work. So
yeah,
yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, and that gives you a really full-rounded approach, because I guess it was very interesting hearing about you managing the 25 journals at the beginning, and in many ways, like you said, that was you having your first 25 clients. So
yeah,
that's really what the foundation was for you, and I guess that taught you a lot of skills, and then to then apply that both client side and agency side. Yeah, really
yeah,
interesting. What a
yeah, and then
varied like set of experiences you've had. It's
yeah.
amazing.
And then, I mean, I haven't even like gone into some of the later careers, but
Yeah, we're only
yeah,
halfway through.
it has been very varied. But what you were saying there about the sort of insight into the agency model has actually stood me in really good stead when I've been managing marketing teams, because I like to think of us as an internal agency, and our clients are
Yes.
the stakeholders around the business. And
Yeah.
for where I am at the moment, we've actually set ourselves up. We work in an agile way, so we have 2 weekly sprints, we have a daily stand up,
Hmm.
and we actually manage our workload that way. Because if we didn't, we would be bombarded with a lot of requests from the business, and it would be unmanageable. At the moment, I've got
Yes.
four marketers in my team and one designer, and we're managing about
Yeah.
46 work streams at any one time. So the only way really
Right.
you
I
can
see.
manage that is through that kind of having some framework, whether it's a Kanban or whether it's something different. But we chose Agile, and it just really helps us to kind of work out for each quarter. Well, okay, we've got this many sprints this quarter. These are the key things. Um,
Mm.
and then I think that the daily stand-ups for me, well, I'm working remotely, and without that daily
Yeah.
stand-up, you could potentially go a day without speaking to anybody. I mean, I tend to be in back-to-back meetings, so I
Yes.
do speak to people a lot, but it's not the same for everybody. So that daily touch point is so important for people when they're working remotely. I think just to, you know, even if it is literally, we do ours for half an hour. We tend to spend the first half of it chatting about anything and everything. What you watched on Netflix last night, how are you doing, all those
Yeah.
kind of things. And then the next 15 minutes, okay, is everybody okay with their tasks? Any challenges, any obstacles, any things that they need support and help with? So I just find that
Yeah.
really, really helpful. And especially in this kind of hybrid remote working, we need to think about different ways to bring people together.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's so important. And even if it's just the peace of mind of having had that togetherness and nothing having been raised, therefore you know that everything's okay. It's just that you feel that you've had that moment where people could share things if they were concerned. But if nobody does, you're okay that things are
Yeah,
moving as they should be. It's just that reassurance. And I know that feeling of a remote working day where you go through the day, okay, yes, meetings, etc. But feel
yeah,
like, gosh, I haven't even spoken to my team today and the day's ended. And days can happen like that, and consecutive days, and then suddenly you feel all at odds with where you're at with things, and it's
yeah,
difficult. So that sounds like a really good model, and fascinating to think of that concept of almost you setting up or building a mini agency within a business. And I think that I
yeah.
can see how that works really well, because it's all about boundaries, isn't it? And it's all about there being a set amount of time and a set amount of resource. And I think sometimes that can be a real challenge for internal marketing teams,
Yeah,
because as we all know, there's such a never-ending list of things that should be worked on. I mean, just this morning I was having a conversation with somebody, and we were talking about this idea of ideas from within the business, and
yeah,
people will see a TikTok or see a post from a competitor and say, let's do that. We should be doing more things like that. And so I think for internal teams, it can be really hard. So you find that that's a good way then of almost, yeah, protecting your time, putting that force
yes,
field around so that good quality work can get done without being bombarded, I
exactly.
suppose, as you say.
Yeah. And it doesn't stop people from still coming to us with those ideas. And to a
Of
point,
course. Yeah, of
we
course.
welcome them to a point, because actually, if people aren't talking to us, we're not doing our job properly. So that,
Sure.
that's something that we want, but also we want it within boundaries of like, okay, well, let's take a brief. What is it that you really are asking for? Because if you've seen a TikTok, what was it about it
Mm.
that drew you to it? What was it that you thought would be useful for us to do something similar? And then you get more to the objectives as opposed to, yes, let's jump on the bandwagon and do some crazy
Yeah.
TikTok. So I think, getting
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
getting your teams to think of your internal stakeholders as almost like clients, it helps you to kind of just
Mm.
step back a little bit and be like, okay, well, what you know what it's like when you've worked in agency. You get some crazy requests from clients, and you're just like, oh, that's not really right for them. But you need to use your skills to explain why in a very diplomatic way, and using
Absolutely.
your marketing prowess to actually say, well, actually, I love what you're saying there, but it's not quite right. How about we do it this way instead, and have that conversation, that discussion?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. And that goes back to, I guess, the point of being a yes man or a yes woman. And that's difficult, and that leads you to a world of pain. And that's okay, that's something that in agency you have to be careful of, but so good internally as well to have that mentality. Just because you're internally doesn't mean that the rules around that should change. Your consultancy and your pushing back is
yes,
part of what you offer.
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah,
really interesting, really
yeah.
interesting.
And I
Oh, we
think
can get
that,
into more of that in a bit. I'd love to listen
yeah,
about your team and how that all
yeah.
goes and how you run that. It'd be interesting. I'll let you carry on with the career
Well, I mean,
up until today.
I was just gonna pick up on your point there, Sophie, about collaboration and sort of being a consultancy inside the business as marketing experts, because I think this leads us on to this kind of RevOps topic, and that's something that is
Yes.
really difficult for a lot of marketers, and I've seen it in different businesses as well, and that you have the best will in the world that you're going to all work together. So whether it's product, customer, sales, marketing, you're all going to work together. But when people get busy, they naturally fall back into their own silos because it's comfortable.
Mm.
They're in their own lanes, don't need to think about anybody else, and it's really difficult sometimes for marketing to keep their tentacles, if you like, their marketing tentacles going out throughout the business to kind of
Yeah.
hear what's going on and say, well, actually, I think maybe we could be involved in that, because if we were, we could really help elevate it, or we could add some of our knowledge and expertise. So I think there's definitely a case for marketing teams to do their own PR internally.
Yeah.
We've come across it ourselves with my team, is that sometimes, as I said before, when we get busy, you can almost get forgotten as a marketing team because you're busy, you're doing
Yeah.
your own things, you're going out, you're setting up events, you're churning out content, you're doing goodness knows what. And sometimes a business can
Yeah.
almost forget that you exist. So I think it's really important,
Mm.
and we do this in my team, is that we actually share our metrics, we share the campaigns that we're doing, we let people know, for example, oh, you guys have got these top accounts you're working on. Did you know they've been doing this on our website lately? Sharing those kind of little nuggets of information with people, and to do it publicly,
Mm.
so that then, it's just a little bit of your own PR to say, we're here, we have information, we have knowledge, we have metrics, and we're here to help and shape the strategies that you're doing in your team. So that RevOps piece is still something that's never quite truly clicked, but I feel like we're getting closer to it now.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I'd imagine in a remote working environment as well, even harder because, back in the day, you'd walk through the corridor and have to listen to a conversation or hear
Exactly.
something on lunch, and it's different, isn't it? But I mean, I love that idea of the octopus and the tentacles. And I guess, do you facilitate that then? Okay, so through the distribution of your report and your metrics, but I guess also it must be a lot of kind of listening back from the other teams in the business, so perhaps more attendance in meetings that typically marketing might
Exactly.
might not attend,
Yeah.
and things like that, and just making sure that you're immersed in it. Because yeah, and just as you were saying that, and that vision of the marketing department, and potentially people not really feeling like they know the marketing department because they're just racing around all the time. I think that's so true. and
Yeah.
and it's often, that's marketing, and they're off and they're doing something busy. But surely there's a problem there if that's the case, because surely we should know each other much better and we should have much more communication. And
Yeah.
that's, yeah, sounds like you've really hit on a great thing there. So yeah, I guess,
Yeah.
so that's a big priority for your team, is it? And they kind of
Yeah.
manage that themselves and get themselves in front of the teams and things like that.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And I think that, as CMO, I can help facilitate that. I can help empower them because at the end of the day,
Mm,
I don't want the whole business coming to me every time there's something that they deem marketing related. If they come to me the whole time,
yeah.
that means they don't know what my team does. So, for example, just recently we redid, our team is growing and restructuring ever so slightly. So we redid our swim lanes. And I've always tried to build a
Okay.
marketing team where you run off your kind of top strategic pillars. So the business that I'm in at the moment, events is a very strategic pillar for us. It doesn't work for every business, but it works for
Hmm.
ours. Then we have
Hmm.
growth, which would include all your kind of digital marketing, your lead generation, your content syndication, those kind of things. Then you have product, and then
Mm,
you have comms or your kind of PR arm, if you like. So we're split into certain
sure.
pillars like that, and then within those pillars we have different swim lanes of who's responsible, who's accountable, because we're working kind of vertically across geographies, and then also then we're working across industry as well. So I think that
Yeah.
one of the things I've tried to do is to get the team to write their own accountability sheets of what they're responsible for, so they feel that ownership, and then to share it with the business. So when people do come to me about something, I don't know, to do with the website, I'm like, okay, well, that's this person over here. You need to go to this person in my team and redirect that conversation so that
Amazing.
hopefully they'll get to just go direct to that person by themselves. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then my regional marketers
That's,
also will sit on the sales calls as well. So there'll be like a US sales call, there'll be an
I
EMEA sales call.
see.
They sit on those calls as well, because I think again that's really important, right? To be really close to what the sales team are struggling with. Understanding, we had a conversation just this morning where one of my regional marketers was on a sales call, and she said they're really struggling at the moment. It's really difficult out there in the market in one particular region, and they really need our help. And I was like, that, do you know what? That is great. That's
Yeah.
gold dust, because if they didn't come to us, we wouldn't know that, and then we wouldn't be able to help react and maybe pivot some of the budget to help towards some of those challenges that they're facing. So yeah, that kind of collaboration I think is
Yes.
really important.
Absolutely. Wow. So many things there. I think that's a really a fantastic kind of approach to have in the business. And also, I think some businesses do that almost halfway house where perhaps there's that sales marketing alignment and you meet with the sales team and you ask them, what are you struggling with on sales calls, or what do you feel like the new emerging customer needs are? But what's not happening there is a marketing brain perceiving that firsthand. We're getting the watered down perception, aren't we, of like a salesperson's view of what the customer was saying. But putting
Mm,
someone who's marketing trained on that call to hear that conversation, they'll pick out different things. So I think that's really important. And maybe we lose a lot of, as you say, the gold dust just from not being there firsthand in that first interaction.
yeah.
So yeah, that's
That's
amazing. I
such,
think businesses maybe shy away from that because of obviously things like time and how does that feel for the customer. But I think on the second point it's very natural, and on the
yeah.
first point that time really like comes back in the sense of the value that you get from the customer experience. I just
Mm,
think that is such a great thing to be doing. So yeah, wow, I'm grateful your team as well for the marketers, because to be able to see customers firsthand, that's also a bit of a dream, isn't it? As marketers,
it
they're
is.
often a bit elusive, and
Yeah,
we're talking about our customers, but we can't really picture one. So to be
yeah,
able to meet them,
yeah,
fantastic.
yeah. And it's
Yeah,
really helped. It's really helped as
great.
well with our sort of voice of the customer work. So we're putting on
Yes,
our
I can
own
imagine.
event in a couple of months, and we actually not just our own event, but the program events we have quite often need a customer speaker. You're sponsoring this event, it
Yes,
comes with a speaking session, but they want you to bring a customer. They don't want to just hear you rant about your product. And because my
yes,
marketers are able to build those relationships directly, they're able to then go and work with the sales director who owns that account to say, let's jointly go and see whether this person would be willing to come and speak with us. And it's great for them because they get to hear straight from that person. They get excited about what they're going to be speaking about, which then helps them when they're thinking about
yeah,
promoting that event as well. So I do think you're
yeah,
absolutely right. You hit the nail on the head there, Sophie, with the kind of idea that getting a marketing brain in there at the beginning is actually really, really
mm,
imperative. And I think that so often gets forgotten.
mm,
And then I've seen it where things come
mm.
to um, too late in the day. The ship's too big to start turning around. It's like you've got an ocean liner here, and you're
Yes,
trying to say, hang on a minute, that's not quite
yeah,
the direction we would have gone. You
yeah,
can't do it because it's
yeah,
already it's moving and it's gone. So if you can
yeah,
get in there
yeah,
before you set sail, you get a chance to actually
yeah.
chart the course together.
Yes, absolutely. It's so funny, isn't it, when marketers speak to other marketers? Because as soon as you say the ocean liner image, I've just completely got you. I know exactly that feeling of like, hang on a second, that we can't do that right now.
Yeah.
Great insight, but it's too far gone, and yeah,
Yeah.
horrible feeling. But yeah, I mean, well, thank you for all of that insight into how it works in your team, because I think that
Mm.
really it's inspiring, and it's almost, well, I guess it's a bit of the agency blueprint that we were speaking about before, but it's
Yeah.
also just that idea, which I feel like sometimes people bring to the core, and it's let's just challenge everything that we do. What?
Yes.
Okay, we don't have marketing in sales calls at the moment, but why not? What's the negative of that? Well, there isn't really one. Okay, well, I think it'd be a huge positive, so let's try it. And just really having that approach is really refreshing. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
No
I'm
problem.
conscious we jumped in there halfway
Yes.
through your career journey. Please do feel free to carry on and take us kind of up to now, even though obviously we've been talking about that just there.
Yeah, so I mean, I spent some time in financial services, and as I said, that was really great from the sort of
Yes.
digital marketing perspective. Then moving agency side, and I was really fortunate actually to be in an agency where I partnered really well with the CEO or the MD of the agency, and I said to him that as a marketer, I also want to be able to not just work with clients, but I want to help you shape that business and build that business and move it forward.
Mm.
And he was, very open to that. But I have to say, it wasn't as easy as that to get his attention because, sort of, oh yes, you can help us do some social posts. You can help with the new business people. But I was like, well, actually, fundamentally, I think we need to look at who we are as an agency. And I
Yeah.
remember it took me, I was getting so frustrated. It took me a long time to get him to realise what I was talking about, probably because I didn't have the vocabulary and the skills to kind of communicate it as best as I would now. But
Mm.
we were talking about actually how do we get more business and how do we get more clients, la la la. And we were talking about redoing our website, and the MD was very much like, well, we need to have like a section on the website that's for business to business, then we need to have a section that's for B2C, and then, you know, we were doing work for any business that would come to our door pretty much. And I
Yeah.
said, well, I'm really sorry, but you're going to need to focus. You need to kind of pick something that you're really passionate about, walk through that door, and unfortunately close the door for some of the other people, because otherwise you become, you know, instead of trying to be everything to everyone, you become nothing to no one. And all of a sudden,
Yes.
kind of like he got it, and he was like, okay, so what would we choose? And I said, well, what are you really passionate about? And he said, well, I'm really passionate
Yeah.
about hospitality, and the work that we're doing with hotels is really fantastic. And basically, long story short, we actually built a really good business off the back of that focused solely on digital marketing for hotels. And
Amazing.
I mean, the guy, the MD, he was a really smart guy, really switched on. But as soon as we made that decision, his
Yeah.
brain was then like, oh, and then we can run this package. And he almost like created this algorithm for hotels that basically said, if you come and, you know, join us as a client, we run through all these programs and we get you these results. And it was very much a kind of, you know, it was a great example of like show value before you get somebody to sign up. But if he hadn't had that kind of
Yes.
eureka moment where he thought, right, okay, I get what she's talking about now, we need to focus, then that wouldn't have happened. So I think that, you know, for me, looking back on my career, even though I wasn't particularly like, you know, highfalutin in my career at that point, I was very proud of that moment that I felt like, actually, you know, I made a real business impact. And I think that's what marketers do. You know, we sometimes get
Yeah.
pigeonholed into this crayons and fluffy colours and, you know, doing nice advertising.
Yeah.
But actually what we do is we change businesses, we make them more profitable, we make them grow.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that can get forgotten. So yeah, that was a great highlight of my career to kind of realise that I'd done something quite special there.
That's amazing. Yeah, what a story. And I mean, you know, kudos to you for being able to have that brain, which I think is such an essential part of being a marketing leader, which allows you to be able to zoom out. You know, everyone knows
Yeah.
agencies are a fast-paced environment, so it would have been totally kind of permissible for you to not be thinking about that, just be thinking about your client work and getting
Yeah.
that done, but actually also having that light bulb moment of, hang on, you know, there's something bigger here. Like if and having that vision of, like you said earlier, it's that ability to be able to step back and have a little
Mm.
distance from what you're inside on the day to day and say something could be better here,
Yeah.
and putting that forward. So yeah, I think that's always such a trait that I see in people from the podcast that, you know, have risen to be in these senior leadership positions. It's really that ability to step out, see the bigger picture, and kind of have that gut instinct of what
Yeah.
needs to be done. And you know, that was a brave call, but it was what was
Mm.
needed. And I think, you know, that's what's needed in marketing, like you say. Otherwise we do just end up taking on everything and doing nothing very well. um,
Yeah. Yeah,
so
you're
so yeah, I
absolutely
can see why that's a highlight. And then that,
right.
imagine that kind of then gave you confidence in, you know, well, hang on a second, I'm quite good at making these big
Yes.
decisions. So
Yeah, exactly. Well, I
yeah,
mean,
and
I
that
did
taking
actually.
forward is nice.
Yeah, and I stayed with that company for quite a while because it allowed me to adapt and grow with the company as it grew itself. And I think that was something that I really
Yeah.
valued. And then so once we had focused into our niche, I then started building out programs for hotels on brand workshops. So again, when you get some of these
Yeah.
smaller boutique hotels, they don't necessarily have the skills to understand what they need from a branding perspective. So they'll go to a designer, oh yeah, we want a nice boutique looking, you know, logo, and we want this, and we want that. But actually to have somebody come in
Yes.
and workshop that with you, you know, I
Yeah.
set out these workshops. They were usually a 2 or 3 day workshop. We'd get all the senior people in from management of that hotel, and we do, you know, things like I don't know if you've heard of the 3 ways of seeing. It's based on a kind of Jungian, Carl Jung kind of methodology, and
Okay.
basically it says, you know,
Mm-hmm.
with three sort of Venn diagram circles, it says, well, who do we think we are, who do we want to be, and who do our customers think we are?
Yeah.
And just going through that
Mm,
exercise was such a light bulb moment for them because they hadn't thought about it in that way
yes.
before. And it gets you as a marketer to be able to show to people visually the gap between where they are today and where they want to be, and then actually the perception of
Yes.
their buyer base. You know, does their buyer base really see them as a boutique hotel, or do they see them as a 3-star kind of, affordable holidays stay? So
Yes.
little things like that,
Yeah.
that was really great to be able to put together a package of those kind of branding workshops, which again allowed the business to charge a little bit of a premium because they're like, well, our head of strategy is going in and going to be talking to you about this, so we could charge 3 or 4 grand a day to be able to send me in to do that, which is much more profitable for the business than saying time and materials. We're going to produce you this many LinkedIn posts. We're going to, do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
again, for a
Yeah.
revenue stream, that was a really good thing for us to add to our kind of bottom line.
Yeah, the strategy days. Like, imagine they got immense value because that really is a gap, isn't it? I mean, you think of a hotel or a business, and they, they really have to self-start and do all that themselves, so they can go and
Yeah.
do the parts disjointed by themselves,
Mm.
speak to a designer, but nobody's knitting it all together or kind of creating that strategy behind it. So yeah, I can see why that's really, really valuable. And also it's really interesting the point around kind of how do we see ourselves, how do our customers see ourselves, and so often that's so confused, isn't it?
Yes, it
And
is.
we have these rose tinted glasses of how we'd love our customers to see us, but actually they don't see that actually there's
No.
this one very strange, I was speaking to a brand the other day, and that they'd done a whole launch on something, and not really much of that had resonated that well, but one tiny aspect of that campaign, which was just really a footnote, had almost gone viral,
Wow.
and so actually that taught them loads about the fact that actually, hang on a second, let's completely reassess customer needs here. Like, this
Mm.
tiny one thing was what was most interesting here. We need to learn from that, and yeah,
Yeah.
I think that can be really misunderstood, and that's such a, well, if you're starting from that point and you're not properly understanding your customer at that very initial point, you end up building a brand based on that, you end up
Yeah.
spending ad budget on that, and you're just in a whole world of pain, and not
Mhm.
resonating, which is where none of us want to be, but it's a common place to be.
It is a common place to
So
be.
it's
Yeah.
difficult.
Yeah. I
That
think in,
that sounds really, I mean, amazing, and also great fun. That must have been so
you know
much
what?
fun.
It really was great fun. Especially some of the hotels we were working for, quite often they were, people that had inherited really massive country manors because it had been in their family for however many years, but they can't unfortunately
Right.
keep them as residential properties because they just cost too much to run.
Mm,
And so they were turning them into
mm.
hotels. So you got to meet some like incredible people that, have never
Yeah.
touched the kind of hotel business before. But they're like, well, this could
Yeah.
be a really great idea. And they had some amazing ideas that were really off the wall that you wouldn't necessarily get with a kind of
Yeah.
chain. So, I met some really fascinating people through that role, and it was great, like traveling
I
around the
can imagine.
country, going to these lovely places, and then I think
Yeah.
there was one client when I said to the MD, I said, well, maybe we could do because they were umming and ahhing about the price of this, some of this work we were doing for them. I said, well, maybe if they could let me
Yeah.
stay there for a couple of days and really soak up the atmosphere and what the hotel really is in its DNA. But maybe that was right. So we did a deal where they kind of cut the price slightly if they let me stay there, and I was just like, this is great.
Wow.
Um, but actually, it did really
Perfect.
help. It did really help, me getting an understanding of how the mechanics of
Yeah.
the hotel worked. But yeah, it was a little bit cheeky on my side, but still.
Yeah. Oh well, when you've come up with such a good idea, I think you're probably entitled to it, so
Yeah.
it's all right. No, that sounds really amazing. Honestly, I feel like that we could run a whole series just talking about all the different things that you've done, and really interesting to delve into all the different kind of lessons that you learn from each of those.
Mm.
We only have about sort of 5 or so minutes left, so I just wanted to touch on, maybe if you could kind of just take us from that point, building hotel marketing strategies and up to now, and then maybe kind of, I guess, in your role at the moment, what you are focusing on, and what maybe is a key priority for you at the moment, or something that
Mm.
potentially is a bit of a challenge that you're trying to overcome or just considering at the moment. So yeah, I guess kind of up to now, what does that look like for you? What's your focus? Where are you at the moment?
Yeah. So I mean, well, very briefly moving on from that period in my career, I then sort of went into a niche of working in the tech space. So this is where I am today in the tech space,
Mm,
and my last few roles have
yes.
been in that, and I've really enjoyed it. And I think, do you know what? I think it reminds me slightly of the agency days and that publishing environment where everything was so fast paced. And I really like that. You know, in an agency, you've got the music blaring, things are moving so quickly. If you don't get something out the door,
Yeah.
you're not getting paid. And in the publishing world, it was a bit like that as well, you know, juggling all this stuff. And I actually really thrive in that kind of environment where I've got lots of things on the go, but a supportive team around us
Mm,
so that we can get through that work. And so, yeah, moving into the tech space where you have startups, you have companies that are in that very high growth mode really suited me in terms of like, right, I'm going to come in, I'm going to build a team, a high performing team, and you know we're really going to help
mm,
this company get from A to B because we've got a really clear indication and direction about where we need to get from a kind of revenue perspective. So that's
hmm.
where I am today. That's where I'm really enjoying that kind of seeing a marketing team grow. And it's so lovely today to see that, you know, that team that I've built from the ground up is flourishing. They're doing really well. You know, I've got high hopes for all of them because I think they're, you know, we're a really lovely close team. It's like a
Amazing.
it's like a family, and it's really great. And
Oh,
I do hope that I
nice.
provide psychological safety for them because that's something that's really important to me. And I think that, you know, as a leader, I like to reflect the idea that actually we are together creating psychological safety where we can talk to each other about anything, you know, no holds barred.
Yeah.
And that means that we're supporting each other and it's really important to the work that we do. But I think just going back to
Mm,
your question around the kind of what's important for us today, what are the challenges, I think that a lot of the challenges remain the same, although some of the bits around them move
mm.
about. But I think
Yeah.
there's still a challenge within this sort of, I think, you know, we talked slightly about the RevOps thing, so I won't go into that, but I think the other key challenge for people going into businesses like this where you've got like high growth environments, there's a real challenge between this brand strategy work and then the lead generation work. And you've got a real push
Yes.
pull where you have your revenue teams, your sales team, your CROs really demand, and actually quite often the board and your, you know, your stakeholders really pressuring
Absolutely.
you to bring in the leads, bring in that top of funnel so that it can go to the sales team. The sales team are busy and they can see that machine working. And yes, that is really vital, but it isn't the be all and the end all. And actually, when you do brand work correctly in a strategic way, it actually fuels your top of the funnel marketing machine. So I think it's really important
Yeah.
that marketers can develop a language where they can talk to people about that so that it is understood. And, you know, I'm still working on that myself. And I think, you know, coming into these last couple of roles, I found that actually I've done a lot of that by stealth because I haven't been able to kind of really speak about the benefits of brand without people going, whoa, well, we're not Nike. Like, I know we're not Nike,
Yeah.
but the hairdressers down the road have to spend money on branding, otherwise nobody knows who she is.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think that's where we struggle. I think as marketers, and I'm obviously not talking for everybody here. I'm talking about myself, but I know peers that feel the same. Is that, you know, we are creative beings, but we also understand revenue, we understand growth, and as you mentioned earlier, you know, getting that marketing brain and using it to its best advantage is where businesses are going to have the best success because, you know, we can see things that
Yes.
other people can't. Our brains work in a slightly different way. And therefore, I think if
Mm,
we can kind of come up with a common language so that we can work with salespeople, we can work with finance people to really, you know, explain why brand is important. Because if you don't invest in brand, there's no point. You can have all the MQLs in the world, but they're never going to convert properly because they don't understand your proposition. They don't understand what you stand for,
yeah.
and perhaps you internally don't understand what you stand for. So that's why going back to some of those
Yeah.
like brand strategy workshops, they're important because if you don't have that commitment to your brand narrative up and down the length of the business, you're never going to get that alignment. And I see it so many times where you get, you know, the business vision, but it doesn't come down to the people on the ground. They don't understand what that vision means and how it aligns to their work on a
Yes.
day-to-day basis. So that's something that's still something that
Mm, mm.
needs to be worked on. And I'm still finding my feet with that, but I'm looking forward to making inroads with that soon, because I think it's a really important subject.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I mean, yeah, a fantastic kind of summary of it there, and I think that that really is something that all of us can identify with, and in some way or another, we have encountered that challenge, and I couldn't agree more. I think, when we have all the focus on the revenue side, it's a bit like kind of having a cardboard cutout street, isn't it? You kind of push it
Mm,
over and it all falls down and there's nothing behind because there's nothing with any sort of integrity that's been built
yeah,
over a long period of time. It's all just a little bit hollow and it's hard because I totally agree with you. I know that position where you're pushing for brand and everyone just thinks we're almost sort of scapegoating to do the easy work, if you like, that
yeah,
it's the creative stuff, that it's the stuff where we don't have pressure put on us. We do, but it's just a whole lot longer term.
yeah,
And so, yeah, I really sympathize, resonate with you on that because it's definitely an ongoing challenge. But great that things like this are happening because the more that the
yes,
conversation comes out into the open, I think the more people realize how much of a real challenge it is. And it is not just an
absolutely,
excuse and it is not just something that, it's a nice to have. It's really essential.
yeah,
So yeah, long may kind of marketing leaders continue talking about that and feeding that down to marketing
yeah,
teams and hopefully kind of businesses will become more aware that it's a really essential part of any strategy.
yeah. And you're not
Yeah, so
alone.
thank you for bringing
If
that
you're
today because I think
if you're a marketer and you're feeling that way,
yeah,
you're not alone.
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I hope that's provided some peace of mind to somebody who's having that tussle right now because yeah, absolutely, as Emily says, you're not alone. And hopefully this community, can create connections for people who knows, maybe someone will listen to this, reach out to you and that's kind of my hope for it, that it
Mm.
provides that support and that peace of mind because it can be a bit of a scary place, can't it?
Yeah, it
Being
can be
that person who has to
isolating.
make the
Yeah,
decisions and
yeah.
has to deal with quite enormous pressure sometimes.
Mm.
So
Mm.
yes, if you're listening, you're not alone. We all struggle with it, and hopefully in time that will become more of a recognized part of a great marketing strategy.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, well, Emily, I'm going to have to stop the conversation. Even though I would love to talk more and more and more about so many things, and I will certainly be following along on your LinkedIn content because I've definitely been finding that really fascinating, and I'd recommend anybody else does the same, just for kind of insights and such a refreshing approach to marketing leadership and marketing strategy. So sorry we don't have time for more, but thank you so much for coming on today and discussing all
Thank
of
you,
that with me.
Sophie.
It was really interesting, and yes, best of luck at Avantra and with the inroads and all the projects
Thank
coming up.
you.
So thank you.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you, Sophie.
No, no problem. No worries. Have a nice day, Emily. Bye.
Bye.